Elias Thorne, a man whose existence was a tapestry woven from the threads of forgotten lore and esoteric artifacts, found solace not in the clamor of the modern world, but within the hushed sanctity of antiquity. His days were spent in pursuit of the rare, the unsettling, the profoundly arcane. It was this singular obsession that led him, one blustery autumn afternoon, down a cobblestone lane obscured by perpetual shadow, to the threshold of the Obscure Relic, an antique establishment whispered about in hushed tones among collectors of the truly unique. The shop itself was a labyrinth of forgotten ephemera, where the scent of aged wood and forgotten dreams clung to the very air, thick as a shroud. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of weak sunlight that pierced the grimy panes, illuminating a chaotic tableau of tarnished silver, crumbling tapestries, and unsettling curiosities. The proprietor, a man named Silas Blackwood, was as much a part of the shop's enigmatic charm as its inventory. His eyes, keen and unsettlingly ancient, seemed to hold the weight of centuries, and his voice, a low rasp, carried an almost hypnotic cadence. Elias, accustomed to Blackwood's theatrical pronouncements, navigated the narrow aisles, his gaze sweeping over the eclectic clutter until it snagged, irrevocably, on a single, astonishing piece. Nestled on a velvet plinth in a dimly lit alcove, as if awaiting discovery, stood the glass woman. She was a sculpture of breathtaking, ethereal beauty, crafted entirely from what appeared to be molten, impossibly clear glass. Her form was exquisitely rendered, capturing a woman in a moment of serene contemplation, her slender neck gracefully bowed, her delicate hands clasped before her. Yet, within her crystalline perfection, there resided an unsettling stillness, an almost preternatural calm that bordered on the macabre. The way the faint light refracted through her, catching the subtle curves of her body, gave her an almost spectral luminescence. "Ah, you found her," Blackwood rasped, materializing beside Elias with an unnerving silence. The glass woman, a piece of singular provenance. He paused, his gaze lingering on the statue with a peculiar mix of reverence and unease. "She is not merely glass, you understand. There are whispers, ancient murmurs, that she holds a power, a life, perhaps, ensnared within her crystalline form." Blackwood's eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of something akin to warning. "She chooses her owner, Mr. Thorne, not the other way around. And once chosen, her influence is not easily escaped." Elias, a seasoned connoisseur of the cryptic, merely offered a dismissive half-smile. He had heard such tales 1,000 times, woven by sellers eager to inflate the mystique and thus the price of their wares. Yet, something about the glass woman resonated with a deeper chord within him. Her silent, elegant presence commanded an almost primal fascination. He found himself drawn to her, not by any rational desire, but by an inexplicable gravitational pull. He purchased her, despite Blackwood's lingering, unreadable gaze and his final, almost inaudible murmur. "Be careful, Mr. Thorne. Some beauty holds a terrible price." The journey back to his secluded, book-lined study was undertaken with an unusual sense of urgency. He positioned the statue on a pedestal opposite his favorite armchair, where the afternoon sun, filtering through the leaded glass windows, could bathe her in a warm, shifting glow. In a sanctuary, away from the dust and shadows of the antique shop, the glass woman seemed to shed some of her former austerity. She shimmered, a silent sentinel, reflecting the room in 1,000 fragmented refractions. He spent hours simply observing her, captivated by the way the light played across her intricate surface, creating illusions of movement, of subtle shifts in expression. Or were they illusions? The first tremor of unease was so faint, so fleeting, he dismissed it as the product of an overactive imagination, fueled by Blackwood's theatrical warnings. As the twilight deepened, casting long, dancing shadows across the study, Elias swore that the curve of the glass woman's lips had subtly softened, the hint of a smile appearing where before there had been only serene neutrality. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. The lips were still, fixed in their original, unyielding repose. It was merely the dying light, he assured himself, playing tricks on his weary mind. He rose, extinguished the lamp, and retired for the night, the image of the glass woman, unmoving and ethereal, etched into his thoughts. Yet, as sleep finally claimed him, a faint, crystalline whisper seemed to drift through the silent house, a sound too delicate to be real, a melody composed entirely of shattered light. The first rays of dawn, hesitant and pale, pierced the leaded glass windows of Elias's study, painting fractured rainbows across the ancient wooden floor. Elias, roused from a fitful sleep, found his thoughts immediately returning to the glass woman. The faint whisper he'd imagined, the subtle shift in her lips. He dismissed it again as a trick of the mind, a lingering remnant of Blackwood's ominous warnings. He was a man of logic, of empirical observation, not fanciful delusions. Yet, a peculiar prickle of unease, like a phantom chill, persisted. He rose, the silence of his grand old house amplifying the soft creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. Stepping into the study, the room felt different, charged with an almost palpable stillness. The glass woman stood on her pedestal, bathed now in the cool, clear light of morning. She seemed utterly static, a perfect crystalline sculpture, just as he had seen her countless times the day before. Her serene expression, her gracefully bowed head, her clasped hands, all were exactly as they should be. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a quiet sigh of relief mingled with a touch of self-reproach for his momentary lapse in a superstition. He approached her, circling the pedestal slowly, examining her from every angle. Her flawless surface reflected his own distorted image, a wavering specter in the polished glass. He leaned closer, searching for any anomaly, any hairline fracture, any imperfection that might explain his earlier sensation. Nothing. She was perfect. But then, as he straightened, his gaze caught something. A minute detail, so subtle it was almost imperceptible. The left hand, previously clasped demurely over the right, seemed to have shifted. Only by a fraction of an inch, perhaps, but it was enough. The tip of her index finger, which yesterday had rested flush against her palm, now appeared to be ever so slightly raised, as if poised to unfurl. Elias frowned, his logical mind struggling to reconcile this observation with the immutable nature of glass. He remembered distinctly how her hands had been. He had spent hours studying her. He even had a photographic memory for such minutiae. He dismissed it again, this time with a more forceful internal monologue. It was the light, the angle, his memory playing tricks. He was tired. Perhaps he had only imagined the specific positioning yesterday. To prove it to himself, he took out his phone, snapped a high-resolution photograph of the statue, particularly focusing on the hands. He would compare it later, in a clear, objective light. The day progressed, but the glass woman had subtly altered Elias's routine. He found himself glancing at her more often, his focus fragmented. He ate his lunch in the study, his eyes constantly drifting towards the pedestal. In the afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the room in hues of amber and rose, he noticed it again. This time, it was undeniable. The angle of her head. It was no longer bowed in serene contemplation. Instead, it was tilted slightly upwards, her chin subtly raised, as if she were now looking directly at him, her blank glass eyes seemingly piercing through the very air. A cold knot tightened in Elias's stomach. He stood abruptly, knocking over his teacup, the ceramic clattering against the polished wood floor, spilling dark liquid. He stared at the statue, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't a trick of light. This wasn't imagination. The change was distinct, pronounced. He retrieved his phone, comparing the new image to the one taken that morning. The difference was stark. The head was clearly at a different angle. The hand was undeniably more open, the fingers subtly splayed. His mind, accustomed to order and reason, recoiled. Glass did not move. Statues, by their very definition, were static. Yet, here she was undeniably shifting, subtly but persistently altering her form. A tremor ran through him, a free zone of genuine fear. Blackwood's words echoed in his mind. She held a power, a life perhaps, ensnared within her crystalline form. The following days became a blur of obsessive observation. Elias slept little, driven by a gnawing compulsion to watch her. He set up time-lapse cameras, hoping to capture the impossible, to rationalize it, to prove it was a hallucination induced by stress or fatigue. But the cameras only confirmed his terror. Frame by frame, the glass woman transformed. Her posture became more fluid, less rigid. Her shoulders seemed to relax, her form softening, taking on an unsettling verisimilitude. The once serene expression on her face twisted, ever so subtly, into something more unsettling, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, a hint of disdain in her unseeing eyes. He started seeing her in reflections. At first, it was fleeting, a glint in the polished surface of his antique writing desk, a distorted shimmer in the leaded glass of the windows. He would catch a glimpse of a woman, not the static sculpture, but a living, breathing entity, her form wavering, her features sharper, more defined. She would be standing behind him in a reflection, or peering over his shoulder, her movements a dark mockery of his own. He would spin around, his heart pounding, only to find the glass woman on her pedestal, still, silent, her glass eyes fixed on nothing. The reflections became more vivid, more insistent. He saw her in the darkened panes of the windows at night, her form outlined against the inky blackness, a spectral silhouette. She would move, her glass limbs extending, reaching, her head turning to follow his every step. He would see her in the mirror in the hallway, not his own reflection, but her as a translucent, horrifying duplicate of himself, her features subtly morphing, her smile widening into a rictus of chilling amusement. He would smash the mirror, his hands trembling, the shards scattering like crystalline tears, only to find the glass woman in his study utterly unchanged, her stillness a profound, silent thought. His sanctuary, his beloved study, was no longer refuge. It had become a gilded cage, its walls closing in, the glass woman at its center, a silent, ever-present sentinel of his growing dread. Her presence was no longer merely unsettling. It was actively oppressive, a tangible weight in the air, a chilling cold that seemed to emanate from her very form. He felt watched, judged, hunted. The faint whisper he'd heard that first night now seemed to resonate in the very foundations of the house, a crystalline hum that vibrated in his bones. He tried covering her with a dark cloth, but the fabric felt strangely resistant, as if it were being pushed back by an unseen force. He heard faint, tapping sounds from beneath the cloth, like delicate fingernails against glass. He ripped the cloth away, finding her now standing with her arms slightly outstretched, her head tilted further back, as if silently screaming. The serene contemplation was gone, replaced by a terrifying, silent agony, or perhaps a silent triumph. Elias began to lose track of days and nights. Food became an afterthought, sleep a distant memory. His once meticulous appearance deteriorated, his clothes disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He found himself talking to her, pleading, demanding answers. The silence that met his desperate pleas was more terrifying than any scream. One evening, as a tempest raged outside, rattling the windows and howling like a banshee, Elias sat slumped in his armchair, his gaze fixed on the statue. The lightning flashes illuminated her in brief, terrifying bursts, making her seem to writhe on her pedestal. He swore he saw her chest rise and fall, a shallow, ghostly breath. Her lips, no longer merely smirking, were now parted, revealing a dark, cavernous void where a mouth should have been. Her eyes, still blank, seemed to deepen, drawing him in, promising unspeakable horrors. The air around her shimmered, distorting the room. making the very walls seem to undulate. He felt a profound, primal terror, a cold certainty that this was no mere statue, no simple optical illusion. This was a living, malevolent entity, and it was growing stronger, feeding on his fear, preparing for its final, horrifying manifestation. The only question now was not if it would fully come alive, but when and what unspeakable fate awaited him when it did. He had to find answers, and quickly, before he completely lost his mind, or worse, his soul. Elias's meticulously ordered world had crumbled, replaced by a chaotic maelstrom of fear and obsession. The rationalist within him, once so unyielding, had been utterly consumed by the chilling reality of the glass woman. Sleep was a forgotten luxury, food an unheeded call. His study, once his sanctuary, was now a gilded cage, its very air thick with the palpable presence of the shifting sculpture. His mind, frayed at the edges, clung to one desperate thought: understanding. He had to know what she was, what ancient power held her, and why she had chosen him for this torment. He abandoned all pretense of normalcy, retreating entirely into the labyrinthine depths of his personal library. Volumes of forgotten lore, treatises on hermetic magic, forbidden grimoires, and dusty encyclopedias of the occult became his sole companions. His fingers, now trembling with a mixture of fatigue and frantic urgency, raced across brittle pages, leaving trails of fine dust. The scent of ancient parchment and decaying leather filled the air, mingling with the faint, almost metallic tang that now seemed to emanate from the glass woman. Days blurred into a single, endless vigil. He worked by the flickering gaslight, surrounded by towering stacks of books, his eyes bloodshot, his face gaunt. Each discovered passage, each cryptic symbol, was a desperate clue. He sought parallels, ancient curses, tales of animated effigies, of souls trapped within inanimate forms. His research was a frantic descent into the abyss of forbidden knowledge, a race against the ever-accelerating transformation of the statue. The glass woman, meanwhile, continued her terrifying metamorphosis. She was no longer merely shifting, she was breathing. Elias swore he could hear the faint, crystalline whisper of air as her glass chest expanded and contracted. Her limbs, once rigidly fixed, now possessed an unsettling fluidity. He'd catch her in his periphery, turning her head, her delicate glass fingers seeming to twitch, her posture slowly contorting from serene contemplation to a grotesque, silent agony. Her eyes, still blank, had begun to glow with a faint, internal light, a cold, phosphorescent gleam that seemed to pierce the deepening shadows of the study. One evening, as Elias pored over a crumbling Latin text on elemental binding spells, a sudden, sharp crack echoed through the room. He flinched, his heart leaping into his throat, and looked up. The glass woman had taken another step in her horrifying evolution. A hairline fracture, impossibly delicate, had appeared just beneath her left eye, running down her cheek like a single, crystalline tear. As he watched, mesmerized by morbid fascination, the fracture seemed to pulse with that internal light, expanding infinitesimally. It was as if the pressure of the soul within was becoming too great for its glass prison. He spent hours poring over dusty diagrams of ley lines and celestial alignments, cross-referencing symbols with ancient runic alphabets, desperately searching for a pattern, a name, anything that might connect to his tormentor. He found scattered references to anima vitrea, or glass souls, in obscure alchemical texts, but the details were maddeningly vague, shrouded in metaphor and veiled warnings. The reflections grew bolder, more menacing. He saw her now in the polished surface of his reading lamp, not as a wavering distortion, but as a distinct, terrifying visage. Her features, though still crafted of glass, were alarmingly human, etched with a profound sorrow that twisted into malevolent fury. She would mouth silent words, her translucent lips moving, though no sound escaped. only the chilling, ethereal hum that now thrummed constantly in his ears. He started to hear faint, disembodied whispers, not from the statue itself, but seeming to emanate from the very walls, from the shadows in the corners of the room. They were fragments of voice, distorted and high-pitched, speaking a language he couldn't decipher, yet their meaning felt intrinsically tied to the growing terror. His breakthrough came on the 7th day of his self-imposed isolation. Buried deep within a rare, leather-bound compendium titled Whispers from the Nether Ether, he found it. A chapter, barely legible, detailing ancient binding rituals, specifically one known as the Soul Glass Confinement. The text described a forgotten order of sorcerers who, in their hubris, sought to immortalize powerful spirits or even human souls by trapping them within meticulously crafted glass effigies. The ritual was complex, involving lunar cycles, specific incantations, and a sacrifice of the ensnared entity's most cherished memory, which paradoxically imbued the glass with a semblance of life. His eyes scanned the chilling words, his breath catching in his throat. The vessel, once imbued, shall hold the essence captive until the spell is broken by its chosen keeper, or until the vessel shatters, unleashing damnation upon all who stand near. He read further, his mind reeling. The chosen keeper was the one whose intrinsic magical resonance, however faint, aligned with the trapped soul's despair, drawing the vessel to them. And the consequences of failure were horrific. Should the keeper fail to liberate the soul or attempt to destroy the vessel, the ensnared essence shall consume their spirit, trapping them in turn, a new anima vitrea. Elias stumbled back from the desk, knocking over a stack of books with a resounding crash. The glass woman, bathed in the eerie glow of the gaslight, seemed to vibrate on her pedestal. The fracture beneath her eye had deepened, branching out like a spiderweb across her cheek. Her arms were now fully extended, her head thrown back, her silent scream more pronounced than ever. But it wasn't agony he now saw in her pose. It was a desperate plea, a silent, agonizing cry for release. He understood. The mysterious power Blackwood had spoken of wasn't just animation. It was a prison. The glass woman was not a malevolent entity by nature, but a tormented soul, desperately trying to break free. And he, Elias Thorne, drawn by some unknown affinity, was her only hope. Or her next victim. The implications were staggering, terrifying. He wasn't dealing with a mere cursed object, but a living, suffering being. And he was now inextricably linked to her fate. He had to free her. But how? The ancient text hinted at encounter ritual, a precise series of actions to release the soul without shattering the vessel, a process fraught with peril. It spoke of a moment of truth, a confrontation where the keeper must face the essence of the trapped soul directly. The alternative was unthinkable. If she remained trapped, or if he failed to free her correctly, his own soul would be condemned to the same crystalline torment. A cold dread settled deep in his bones, colder than any chill from a statue. He looked at the glass woman, her blank eyes now seeming to hold an untold story of suffering, of ancient betrayal. The choice was clear, yet agonizing. He had opened a door to a horror he could barely comprehend, and now he was bound by destiny or curse to walk through it. The true battle, he realized with a sickening lurch of his stomach, had only just begun. The glass woman stirred, her head slowly lowering, her luminous eyes fixing directly on him. A silent challenge, a desperate plea, and an unspoken threat, all in one terrifying gaze. The ancient text, Whispers from the Nether Ether, lay open on Elias's desk, its brittle pages illuminated by the flickering gaslight. Its final, chilling words echoed in his mind. The moment of truth, the precise counter-ritual to liberate the soul, or the ultimate damnation. He had no choice. His gaunt face was a mask of grim determination. His eyes, though bloodshot, burned with a desperate resolve. He had found a cryptic diagram, a sequence of symbols and a precise arrangement of elemental conduits, salt, iron, pure water, and dry nightshade to be placed around the pedestal. The ritual had to be performed at the cusp of midnight, when the veil between worlds thinned and the trapped soul's connection to its vessel was at its most volatile. As Elias meticulously arranged the components, his hands trembling, the air in the study grew heavy, thick with an almost visible tension. The glass woman, previously a silent observer, now seemed thrown with an internal energy that vibrated through the very floorboards. The hairline fracture beneath her eye had widened, spreading across her flawless cheek like a map of tortured veins. From within her glass form, a faint, crystalline light pulsed, illuminating the deepening shadows with an eerie, phosphorescent glow. Her arms, once gracefully clasped, were now extended fully, palms open, a gesture that was both a silent plea and a terrifying welcome. Her head, thrown back, revealed a mouth now visibly agape, a silent scream frozen in exquisite agony, or perhaps anticipation. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 11 times, its resonant tones swallowed by the oppressive stillness of the study. Elias lit the 4 tallow candles, their flames dancing wildly in the unnatural currents that now swept through the room. The scent of melting wax mingled with a faint, metallic tang, like ozone, emanating directly from the statue. He began the incantation, his voice a hoarse whisper, reciting the ancient, guttural words from the grimoire. The air around the glass woman shimmered, distorting the very fabric of the room, making the bookshelves appear to undulate, the paintings on the wall to ripple like disturbed water. Suddenly, a profound shift occurred. The crystalline hum that had plagued Elias for days intensified, rising to a piercing, high-pitched resonance that threatened to shatter his very eardrums. The glass woman's internal light flared, blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, he gasped. She was no longer on the pedestal. She stood before him, poised and terrifyingly alive, her glass feet touching the polished oak floorboards. Her form, though still crafted of impossibly clear glass, was now fluid, almost liquid, her movements rippling like water. Her features, previously blank, were now exquisitely defined, a face of breathtaking, ethereal beauty, yet etched with a profound, ancient sorrow that twisted into a chilling malevolence. Her eyes, still made of glass, glowed with an unnerving, self-luminous intensity, fixing on him with an intelligence that stole his breath. "You have come," a voice echoed, not from her lips, which remained still, but directly inside Elias's mind, cold and clear as frozen water. "The Keeper, my liberator, or my damnation." Elias stumbled back, clutching the heavy grimoire to his chest like a shield. This was it, the moment of truth. Her presence was overwhelming, a tangible weight that pressed against his chest, stealing the air from his lungs. He felt a profound sense of despair emanating from her, a wave of ancient, trapped agony that threatened to consume him whole. He could see the sorrow in her luminous eyes, but beneath it, a predatory hunger, an age-old yearning for freedom at any cost. He continued the incantation, his voice shaking, forcing out the words that promised liberation. As he spoke, the glass woman began to move. She drifted towards him, her glass limbs extending, graceful yet menacing. Her fingers, long and translucent, reached out, not to grasp him, but to touch his very essence. He felt a chilling cold invade him, seeping into his bones, a tendril of icy despair that sought to extinguish his will. Visions flickered before his eyes, fragmented memories, moments of profound loneliness, of unfulfilled ambition, of forgotten fears. She was probing his mind, seeking weaknesses, seeking entry. "You cannot free what you do not understand." The voice resonated in his skull, laced with a chilling amusement. "You seek to break me, but I am merely a mirror." Desperate, Elias raised his hand, reciting the final, most potent verse of the counter-ritual, a verse that was meant to sever the bond and release the soul. He focused on the glass woman, pouring all his remaining will into the words, commanding the release. He saw the fracture on her cheek deepen, spiderwebbing further, and a faint, mournful sigh seemed to emanate from her, a sound of profound relief, or perhaps profound sorrow. And then, in a terrifying, shattering instant, it happened. As the final word of the incantation left his lips, the glass woman's form shimmered violently, her luminous eyes flaring with an unbearable light. Her exquisite glass features began to distort, to melt and reform, not into something new, but into something horrifyingly familiar. The delicate jawline broadened, the slender nose gained a subtle hook, the elegant eyes, though still glowing, became unmistakably his own. The long, slender fingers thickened, the graceful posture shifted, the long, flowing hair of glass receded, replaced by the stark, receding hairline that had become so familiar in his own reflection. Elias froze, his breath hitched in his throat, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The glass woman, standing before him, was no longer a woman. She was him, a perfectly rendered, horrifyingly transparent version of himself, crafted of living glass, his own features twisted into a rictus of profound despair and silent horror. His own eyes, now staring back at him from the glass effigy, were wide with a terror that mirrored his own. The voice, previously cold and distant, now boomed inside his mind, raw with agony, yet undeniably his own. Fool, you sought to free me, to break the spell, but the spell was never on her. It was on you. The glass Elias before him began to crack, not just a single fracture, but myriad fissures spreading across his chest, his limbs, his face. As each crack appeared, a jolt of excruciating pain shot through Elias's own body, as if his very bones were splintering. He stumbled, collapsing to his knees, his hands flying to his chest, where he felt an unbearable pressure, a crushing weight. The room spun, the gaslight flickered, the hum grew deafening, then faded to a whisper. The glass man, his own image rendered in crumbling crystal, stood before him, still shattering. His glass lips parted, and a final, guttural whisper tore through Elias's mind, an echo of his own voice, filled with a despair so absolute it was a physical blow. You were the anima vitrea, Elias. You always were, trapped by your own obsessions, your own arcane desires. This was your affliction. This was your prison. And now, you're free to join me. As the last shard of the glass effigy of Elias Thorne dissolved into a fine, glittering dust, a wave of profound, cold emptiness washed over the real Elias. He lay on the floor, his body racked with tremors, his mind a chaotic mess of shattered thoughts. He tried to move, to cry out, but he couldn't. His limbs felt heavy, inert. He tried to breathe, but his lungs refused to obey. A chilling cold began to seep into his very core, an unbearable stillness. He could see his study, the bookshelves, the flickering gaslight, but it was as if he were looking through a pane of glass, detached, distant. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. He tried to close his eyes, but they remained fixed, wide open, staring blankly ahead. He was aware, exquisitely aware, but utterly immobile. His body was cold, stiff, unyielding. He could feel the fine glass dust settling on his skin, merging with it. From the corner of his eye, he saw it. The pedestal, empty just moments before, now held a new figure. A man, exquisitely rendered in impossibly clear glass. His form frozen in a moment of profound horror, his eyes wide and blank, staring out into the empty room. Elias Thorne, the connoisseur of the arcane, had become the ultimate artifact in his own collection. The glass man, a silent sentinel, trapped forever in his own gilded cage. The faint, crystalline hum was the only sound now, a lullaby of eternal confinement.